Hi everybody, it's Brian and I'm back with Lesson 9 Part 2. This time we're drawing another similar linkage bar, but this time something which is maybe a little bit more organic in shape or style. The idea is that we have one that is quite sort of like standard, and then this other one that is a little bit more interesting. One thing to note, the spacing and the size of these holes is identical to this bar here. So these are 80 millimeters apart, 10 millimeter holes. This one, 80 millimeters apart, 10 millimeter holes. So that part is the same. The exterior profile changes, and that's where we're going to have a little bit of fun. So I just want to kind of show you how to use the spline tool with this one. And in full disclosure, the one that we do now will probably not look anything like this one because I'm using the spline tool. This is not a fully defined sketch. It's just rather an interesting geometry. So let's go ahead and get this started by starting a new file, create a sketch on this top plane. And I'm going to start with that circle at the origin point, just like I did last time. So I'm going to go ahead and dimension this. I'm going to give it a dimension of 10 millimeters. And then I'm going to go ahead and create the end circle of this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and create another circle, hover here at the midpoint, start to pull away, pull that out, and click a dimension. This is going to be D1. And I'm going to put that exterior circle on this too, just so we can line the ends of those two, this and the bone bar, so that they're similar as well on the ends. So I'm going to create another circle here at this point, pull it out, and give that had a diameter of 20. So this isn't so critical on that middle circle, because I'm going to do one big spline that kind of goes around these guys, but it is important here. Give this guy a couple constraints. So I want the center of this circle here, and I'm going to hold down Shift and select my origin point. I want them to be lined up horizontal to one another, and I'm going to create a dimension between here, and that wants to be 80. Again, this is to make sure that the holes of this one line up with the holes of that original bone bar. I'm going to drop in a center line just like I did before. So put this in, create a construction line, and I'm going to grab this, hold down Shift, grab this, mirror it. I need to select my mirror line of this point, and that clicks OK. So this part, you'll notice all of those are black because this is in fact fully defined. The outside geometry does not really matter too much of what this is, as long as this functions with these 3 points in common with that other one. So now I'm going to use a tool called the spline tool, and it's been sitting in front of us most of this whole time. There are a couple different ways of doing the spline. The fit point spline is the easiest, and I think probably the most useful, and that's probably why it's the default tool here. So I'm going to click on spline. Again, it's here under create as well. Under spline, you can see you have a control point spline as well. I'm going to do the fit point spline. Control point spline, by the way, is a little bit easier to define if you want other people to kind of follow. Like if I was doing a tutorial and I wanted you all to draw the exact same shape I was, the control point spline is probably a little bit easier to define, but the fit point spline I think is going to be more fun for us. So I'm going to choose that. I want to start on this circle somewhere, and it all depends. I want to think about how it's going to start to come off tangent to this, because one of the last things I do is I'm going to create a tangency between this circle and my spline tool. So I'm going to go ahead and click that point and come up and then come down, and maybe we'll come way down, and then we'll go around this hole a little bit here in a funny sort of way. That looks good. Come up here, and then maybe we'll come up above. Now let's just go into the circle at that point. Okay, when you're done with the spline, you notice it, like I clicked on the circle, even though I had a blue X, it still hasn't stopped my spline tool. It still wants to keep creating that spline. What you need to do is go back to that point, right click and click OK, and that will end the spline. And then I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing kind of here on the other side. So re-invoke that spline tool. I'll probably start tangent here. We'll make this a little bit wider into the middle there. We'll try to go around this hole this way. I don't want to get too big. And we'll come in tangent there. So there it is. And then again, when you're done, right click on top of that and click OK. And that's going to create kind of that outside profile. Now, once we have these lines, you can see that the blue lines are my spline. These green lines are my control lines. So I can start to control that tangency a little bit by starting to click where those lines, and you'll see how that starts to change the tangency of that. I can make this like bubble way out. But before I get too crazy with that, what I'm going to do is create a tangency, because I want the transition from my spline into these arcs at the end to be a smooth transition, i.e. anybody? Tangent relationship. So I'm going to make sure nothing is selected. I'm going to come up here to constraints. I'm going to click on tangent. I'm going to make sure I get the blue line. Don't click the green lines. Make sure you hit the blue line and then the circle, and then the blue line and the circle. So that creates a tangency between these two, a tangency between these two. And I'm going to do the same thing here. So blue line, circle, blue line, circle. So that's going to allow that to be a smooth transition no matter how I start to manipulate these splines. I'm going to hit escape to get out of that, and then I can start to manipulate this guy to make it a little bit more interesting if I want. That looks a little bit more fun. You can kind of play with these guys a little bit if you want. You can change where these points are, which helps you start to manipulate that geometry in an interesting way. I do kind of like what's happening here. I wish this got a little bit thinner. The cool thing is we're in Fusion 360, so I'm not really paying attention. Like, if I were actually making this, I'd have to think about the material I was making and be like, is it too thin to fit to support the mass that I'm trying to create here? This looks a little funny there, so we'll tune these in. So I'm literally just tuning my geometry now that I have all of these identifiers. I'm going to go ahead and click to allow my control lines to happen, and then I can start to manipulate this a little bit. There we go, till I get something that I'm really happy with. So we'll say that that looks good to us, even if you don't like it. Sorry, tough. And I'm going to go ahead and trim out these extra bits of circle here. So I go to trim, get rid of that guy, and get rid of that guy, and finish my sketch. So that creates those three holes that are all lined up. And I'm going to go ahead and extrude this guy, select that surface. I'm going to go to symmetric. Measurement is going to be the whole length, and again, I want this to be similar to that other one that was also 5 millimeters in thickness. Click OK. I'm going to add my text to this as well, so I'll go to create. Whoops, I need to go to create a sketch on that surface. Go here, add text, Dali bar. And just to show you that you can do this, I am going to change the font to something silly. I used the, where is it? The Chiller font, which is kind of crazy. Just showing you that you can use more complex fonts, but watch when I go to try to extrude this, it's gonna, Fusion's gonna hiccup a little bit on this. So I click finish the sketch, and I'll go ahead and do extrude, select that, and I want to do a cut into the surface, and we'll do 1 millimeter. And you can kind of see how much slower it's reacting to that. I type in something and it takes a while for it to react to that because it's so complicated. If you look at these guys, you know, this is an incredibly complicated line. So it's making all of these facets. It's got to do a lot of math. And so you'll see when you start to use fonts that are more complicated like this, that it really does affect the speed with which your computer works. Last two things. One, I'm going to add that lovely fillet around the outside, so we'll do that here quickly. So fillet, I'm going to choose this edge and this edge, and that was a 1 millimeter fillet just to soften up that edge. There we go. And the very last thing you want to do is save this. So we'll do save. And it's important to save this because we're going to use these saved files in the next step. So there you go. That's our second bar. Again, shape, not important. Distance between the holes and size of holes, important. So hopefully that was helpful and you learned something. Catch me in the next tutorial when we do 9-3, part 3, which will be all about putting these things together and making them move related to one another. All right, thanks for tuning in. Bye.